I woke up before the sun, though I couldn't tell if it was the sound of my phone or the guilt already waiting in my chest that pulled me out of sleep. The room was still dim, pale gray light leaking through the curtains. My phone buzzed again, sharp and insistent, vibrating on the wooden nightstand beside the bed. I didn't even have to look at the screen. No one else called me this early. I answered without checking. "Mum!" There was no greeting, only her voice tumbling through the speaker, heavy with tears and urgency. "Ivana, darling, thank God you picked up. Your father's had a terrible day. Something about his betting account. They're threatening to take his car. We need £3,000 before noon or he'll lose it." Her voice was trembling but practiced, like she had rehearsed this speech many times before. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the paint that looked like veins. For a second, I tried to remember when was the last time she called just to ask how I was. I couldn't. "Mum," I said softly, trying not to sound tired, "how long has this been going on?" "Oh, just recently. You know how your father gets. He didn't mean to. Please, sweetheart, just this once. Just this once." The same 3 words that had followed me since I was 22 and got my first paycheck. I pushed myself out of bed. The floor was cold beneath my bare feet. As I walked to the kitchen, the city outside still slept. London looked peaceful through the fog, like nothing bad ever happened here. I made a cup of coffee and placed my phone on the counter on speaker. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll send it now." Her voice brightened immediately, almost cheerful again. "You're an angel, Ivana. We'll pay you back as soon as we can, you know that." I didn't answer. I just opened my banking app. My thumb hesitated above the screen for half a heartbeat, then pressed confirm transfer. The phone chimed. Money gone, peace purchased temporarily. "Done," I said. Mum exhaled with relief. "You always take care of us. I don't know what we'd do without you." That last line lingered after the call ended. I stared at the steam rising from my coffee and whispered to no one. Neither do I by the time I reached the office. The sun had finally broken through the haze. The glass towers of Canary Wharf caught the morning light and threw it back like blades. I loved this part of London, precise, polished, predictable. Numbers didn't lie, unlike people. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored wall, pale face, dark circles, lipstick faded. I'd worked until midnight the night before, finishing a report that could have made me eligible for promotion. When the doors opened, the rush of voices and the low hum of printers hit me all at once. My assistant, Ben, looked up from his desk. "Morning, Ivana. They've moved the meeting up. 15 minutes. "Of course they have," I muttered under my breath, forcing a smile. The boardroom smelled of coffee and nerves. A projector hummed softly, casting charts onto the wall. I took my seat at the end of the table, laptop open, notes ready, but my mind kept drifting back to my mother's voice. "We need you, sweetheart, just this once." My manager, Richard, was speaking, pointing at the slides, but his words blurred together. I kept nodding at the right moments, smiling where appropriate, pretending I was still there. Halfway through, Richard leaned over and whispered, "You good? You seem somewhere else." "I'm fine," I lied. The meeting ended an hour later. I walked out before anyone could start small talk. In the hallway, my phone buzzed again, a text from Mum. "Thank you, love. Dad says he'll pay you back soon, don't worry." I didn't reply. By the time I got home that night, the world outside was wrapped in drizzle. Streetlights blurred through raindrops on my window. I hung my coat, kicked off my heels, and let the silence swallow me whole. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. My phone sat face down on the table. I didn't want to look at it, didn't want to see the next request waiting like a loaded gun. It was strange how guilt worked, how it could make you feel responsible for every problem you didn't create. I had a good job. I had a nice flat. People at work said I was lucky. But luck felt like a loan with no clear interest rate. I opened my laptop, trying to distract myself with work. The blue light made the room look sterile, almost surgical. In my inbox, a new message waited from HR. Reminder, promotion announcement this Friday. I should have felt excited. Instead, all I felt was tired. Later, lying in bed, I replayed the morning call in my head. The desperation, the manipulation disguised as affection. I thought about my father, sitting at home, smoking, maybe already making new bets with the money I'd sent. My mother once told me that family was a circle, what you give always comes back. I used to believe that. Now I wasn't sure if what came back was love or obligation. Before closing my eyes, I whispered into the dark, "They only call when they need something." The words felt cruel but true, and somehow that made them even heavier. The next morning I arrived at work early. The air smelled like coffee and ambition. My colleagues were chatting near the espresso machine, laughing about weekend plans. I smiled politely, the way people do when they no longer know how to join in. Ben handed me a folder. "You're up for review soon. If anyone deserves that director role, it's you." I thanked him, but my stomach twisted. I knew how the last review had gone. I had been on the short list before until another family emergency had pulled me away. Numbers, deadlines, deals, all of them had become collateral damage in the quiet war between my success and my family's chaos. At noon, during a break, I called home not because I wanted to, but because silence felt dangerous. Mum answered quickly. "Hi, love. Oh, did you see the transfer went through?" "Yes," I said. "Did Dad manage to fix the car?" "Sort of. He's thinking of trading it for a new model." I felt something cold spread through my chest. "A new model, I thought," she interrupted before I could finish. "Don't worry about it. He just wants something reliable. Anyway, how's work? You sound tired." I almost laughed. "I am." "Well," she said cheerfully, "don't overwork yourself. Money isn't everything." The irony hit me like a punch. I bit my lip and ended the call politely. When the line went dead, I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. The reflection staring back at me looked like someone older, someone who'd spent too long trying to earn affection that wasn't for sale. That evening, I walked along the Thames. The wind carried the smell of rain and river water. Lights shimmered on the surface, breaking and reforming with each ripple. I watched a couple nearby sharing a paper cup of hot chocolate, laughing softly. Their warmth looked effortless. It struck me then I had built my life like a fortress. Every success was a brick, every favor to my family a hole in the wall, and lately the holes had started to outnumber the bricks. When I reached home, I stood before the mirror again. My reflection stared back silently, waiting. "They don't call because they love me," I whispered. "They call because they can." And for the first time, I said it without crying. That night I dreamt of being 10 years old again, sitting in our old living room while Dad scratched lottery tickets on the coffee table. Mum prayed out loud for luck, and I watched them, too small to understand what losing felt like. When Dad realized none of the tickets had won, he slammed the table so hard the glass cracked. Mum said, "It's fine, Ron, next time." Then both of them looked at me as if I was supposed to fix it. I woke up sweating. The taste of childhood guilt still clung to my mouth. The following morning brought another call, this time from Liam. "Hey, sis," he said, sounding casual. "My laptop died, totally dead. I need a new one for work." "For work?" I asked. "I thought you quit the cafe last month." "Yeah, but I'm starting a new project soon. Freelance stuff, need proper equipment." I sighed quietly. "Liam, maybe it's time to get a job that actually pays first." He chuckled, low and bitter. "There it is, the banker talk. Not everyone's obsessed with money like you." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I said nothing. 5 minutes later, I found myself ordering a new laptop online. I chose next-day delivery because apparently that's what love looked like in my family, efficient transactions. That evening, I received an email from my manager again. The subject line was simple: "Ivana, promotion decision." I hesitated before opening it. "After careful consideration, we've decided to offer the role to another candidate. Your dedication is commendable, but consistency is key." Consistency. The word sliced deeper than I expected. I read it again, slower. I knew what it meant. They needed someone who wouldn't vanish during crises, someone who didn't have a family like mine. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. Outside, the rain began again, steady and merciless. For a long time, I just listened to it. When the night deepened, I poured another glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights flickered like they were breathing. I opened my journal, the one I never showed anyone, and wrote down a single sentence. "I am tired of being everyone's safety net." The ink bled slightly on the paper, as if even the pen was exhausted. I closed the journal, turned off my phone, and let the world shrink into quiet. Tomorrow, I would wake up to another message, another emergency, another reason to feel needed. But for now, for this one fragile night, I let myself be no one's hero. The next morning, the sky over London looked heavy and colorless. I made coffee and watched the steam curl above the cup. The smell should have comforted me, but it only reminded me how mechanical my mornings had become. Wake up, answer messages, send money, work, sleep, repeat. The city was awake outside, buses rumbling past the window, people rushing to somewhere they wanted to be. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that kind of purpose. I checked my phone even though I didn't want to. 3 new notifications. One from the bank confirming yesterday's purchase for Liam's laptop. One from Mum, a photo of a new coat captioned, "Got it on sale, don't worry, your father insisted." And one from Richard, my manager, reminding me about tomorrow's client meeting. I placed the phone face down again. Sometimes I thought about turning it off completely, just disappearing for a week, but I knew the silence from my side would be met with panic, accusations, guilt. It was easier to keep paying than to face the noise. At work, the day moved in quick, predictable motions. I smiled when expected, joined discussions I barely heard, and nodded at presentations I could have done in my sleep. During lunch, Ben asked if I wanted to join the team for drinks that evening. I said I had plans. I just didn't know how to be present around people whose worlds weren't collapsing quietly under obligation. That evening, I walked home instead of taking the tube. The air was sharp and cold, cutting against my cheeks. Christmas decorations had started appearing in shop windows. Gold ribbons, artificial snow, mannequins in sequin dresses. Families passed me, carrying bags of gifts, laughing easily. I wondered how many of them were pretending too. When I reached my building, the doorman greeted me with a warm smile. "Evening, Miss Mann. Big weekend coming up?" "Just another one," I replied, forcing a grin. In the elevator, my reflection stared back at me again, trapped between silver walls. I looked professional, composed, successful, everything people were supposed to admire. But underneath, I was hollowed out by the weight of expectation. Inside my flat, the silence felt thicker than before. I turned on the small lamp near the sofa, its light soft and amber, then sat down and took a deep breath. For years I had been repeating the same pattern. They asked, I gave, they apologized, I forgave. Somewhere along the way, forgiveness had turned into permission. I opened my laptop not to work but to check my accounts. Numbers filled the screen. Debits, credits, transfers, dates. I scrolled through them slowly, letting the reality sink in. Every transaction told a story. Rent for Mum and Dad's house. Repairs for Dad's car. Tuition for Liam's half-hearted course he never finished. I calculated quietly nearly 40% of my income each month went to them. I could have bought a second property by now. Instead, I was financing their chaos. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call request from Mum. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Her face appeared, framed by the familiar floral curtains behind her. She smiled brightly. "Hi, darling, just checking on you. You sound tired these days. You should treat yourself more." "I'm fine," I said. Dad's voice came from somewhere off screen. "Ask her about next month's bills." Mum tried to lower her voice, but I heard it anyway. "Ronald, not now." He appeared beside her, looking annoyed. "Ivana, your mother's worried about the heating bill. You know how expensive winter gets. Maybe you can send something early this time." "Dad, I sent money 3 days ago." He frowned. "And it's gone already. You don't understand how things are. You live in the city, you think it's all easy for everyone else." "I never said that," he sighed dramatically. "Families should support each other. Isn't that what you always say?" I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled, the same empty smile I'd learned as a child. "I'll see what I can do." When the call ended, I sat staring at the black screen. My own reflection flickered faintly in the glass, looking like a stranger. It was then I realized I had never truly learned how to say no. That night, I dreamt of drowning, not in water, but in voices. Mum asking softly, Dad demanding loudly, Liam laughing carelessly, every word a weight pulling me deeper. When I woke up, the sound of rain against the window felt like relief. Saturday came gray and quiet. I made breakfast but barely ate. The apartment smelled of burnt toast and solitude. I sat on the couch, scrolling through emails, when another message arrived from Mum. "Sweetheart, don't worry about the bills. We'll manage somehow. Love you always." I stared at the words. They were supposed to comfort, but they felt like bait. I knew what would follow: another call, another story of need wrapped in guilt. By late afternoon, I decided to leave the flat. I walked without direction, letting the cold air wake me up. The Thames looked like metal under the cloudy sky. I leaned on the railing, watching the current. Somewhere nearby, a street musician played a soft tune on the violin. It sounded fragile, like something trying to hold itself together. A woman beside me, maybe in her 40s, smiled politely. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, though my voice came out quiet. She looked at me again, maybe noticing the exhaustion behind my eyes. "You look like someone who carries too much." I didn't answer. She smiled knowingly. "Let some of it go, love. The river can take it." When she walked away, her words stayed. That evening, I opened my journal again. The same page as before. Under the line that said I am tired of being everyone's safety net, I wrote another. Maybe it's time to fall and see if I survive. The next morning came with light snow. My phone rang again like clockwork, Mum's name on the screen. I stared at it until it stopped. A minute later, another call, this time from Liam. I let it ring too. The silence that followed was strange, almost frightening, but also liberating. I made coffee, turned on some music, and for once didn't check my messages. I cooked breakfast for myself, scrambled eggs, tomatoes, toast with butter. It felt like the smallest rebellion in the world. By noon, I had missed 5 calls and 2 voicemails. I played one of them. Mum's voice sounded tense. "Ivana, are you all right? You're scaring me. We need to talk about the mortgage." I deleted it. That night, I went out for the first time in months. Ben had organized a small team dinner. I almost canceled, but something in me wanted to be around laughter that didn't cost anything. The restaurant was warm and loud, filled with conversation and the smell of roasted garlic. Ben raised his glass. "To survival," he joked, and everyone laughed. I did too, but something inside me stirred. Survival. That was what I'd been doing all along, surviving in a family that only remembered I existed when they needed saving. On the way home, snow began to fall again, soft and thin. The city lights shimmered through it like stars too close to the ground. For the first time, I felt a quiet defiance growing inside me. A whisper that said, "You can stop." But I didn't yet know how. When I entered the flat, the answering machine light was blinking. I pressed play. Dad's voice filled the room, loud and irritated. "Ivana, you've been ignoring your mother. This is not how a daughter behaves. We're family. You owe us that respect." Respect. Another word they used like currency. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I unplugged the machine. The silence that followed was the cleanest sound I'd heard in years. Before bed, I looked out at the city again. The snow had stopped, leaving the rooftops powdered white. The street below was empty. I whispered into the quiet, "One day I'll stop paying for love." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. I had said them for myself, and that was enough. I lay down, the air still cold but softer now. For the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. When morning came, sunlight slipped through the curtains, thin but honest. I opened my eyes, and the world felt slightly less heavy. Part of me still waited for the next call, but another part, small, brave, and unfamiliar, hoped it wouldn't come. And as the clock ticked toward noon, with the phone lying silent on the nightstand, I realized something extraordinary. Peace wasn't loud. It was the absence of expectation. That was the morning I began to understand the price of love. The morning after that quiet day of peace, I woke up with an unfamiliar lightness in my chest. It was fragile, like a soap bubble that could burst at any second, but it was real. The phone hadn't rung, no new messages, no emergencies. For a few blissful hours, I almost believed that silence could last. By 9 o'clock, I was already at my desk in the office. My coffee steamed beside my keyboard, and the low hum of conversations filled the room. For the first time in weeks, I felt focused. Numbers lined up neatly in my spreadsheet. Everything made sense here. Money followed logic. Actions had consequences. There were no guilt trips or invisible debts. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. The screen showed Mum, incoming video call. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Her face appeared, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. "Hello, darling, you look tired. Are you eating well?" "I'm fine, Mum. What's going on?" "Oh, nothing dramatic. Just thought we'd all catch up together." The camera shifted as she turned, revealing Dad behind her, leaning back in his chair with a cigarette between his fingers. Liam appeared a moment later, waving lazily from the sofa, his hoodie pulled over his head. "Hey sis," he said, chewing on something. "How's life in the big city?" "Busy," I said. Dad chuckled. "Busy, but you're doing well, aren't you? 6 figures, right? That's what you told your mum." I froze for a second, unsure if that was admiration or accusation. "I manage," I said carefully. Mum jumped in quickly. "Don't mind your father. He's just proud. We're all proud." Dad blew smoke toward the camera. "Proud, sure, but maybe she could help her old man out a little." "Things are tight again this month." "Again?" I asked quietly. "What happened to the money I sent last week?" He shrugged. "Bills, you know how it is. Electricity repairs, I can't keep track of everything." Liam laughed. "Maybe you should. You're the financial expert, aren't you, sis?" I stared at his grin and felt something tighten in my stomach. "Liam, you're still looking for a job?" He rolled his eyes. "I told you I'm freelancing. Gigs come and go." "Do any of those gigs pay?" "Wow," he said, leaning back. "You really are corporate now, counting other people's money." Mum's voice cut in quickly, smoothing the tension like a practiced diplomat. All right, no fighting. Family means helping each other, that's what matters." I nodded, though it felt more like surrender. "Fine," I said softly. "How much do you need?" Dad smiled, the corners of his mouth curling into that familiar, satisfied expression. "Nothing big, maybe 1,500, just to cover the gap until next week." "Next week?" "Yes, next week," he repeated, as if saying it enough times could make it true. I transferred the money while they were still on the call. The moment the notification sound chimed, their tone changed, lighter, warmer. Mum clapped her hands softly. "You've always had such a big heart, Ivana," Dad grinned. "We'll pay you back soon, love," Liam smirked. "You're the best, sis." I smiled too, but it didn't reach my eyes. After the call ended, I sat for a long time in the empty conference room. Outside the glass walls, the city glittered with efficiency and purpose. Inside, I felt like a machine programmed to give. I opened my financial planner out of habit. My income looked impressive on paper, but nearly half of it evaporated into transfers, repairs, and emergencies that never stopped being emergencies. I highlighted the total and stared at the number. It was enough to buy freedom, yet it was the cost of my prison. The next day during lunch, my colleague Maria slid into the seat beside me in the cafeteria. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Of course," I said, smiling. "Why? You just look like someone who's always somewhere else." Her observation hit too close to home. "I guess I am." She nodded, sipping her coffee. "You ever take a break?" "I can't afford to." "Funny," she said. "That's what people usually say when they have too much money and not enough peace." I wanted to laugh, but the truth sat too heavy to joke about. That evening, I went straight home. I cooked pasta, something simple, then ate alone by the window. Outside, Christmas lights were starting to appear again, wrapping the city in artificial warmth. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mum. "Can you book tickets for us for New Year's Eve? Prices are going up. We'll pay you back once Dad gets his bonus." I laughed out loud, though it wasn't out of amusement. The sound echoed strangely through the apartment. I typed back, "I'll see what I can do." A lie, but an easy one. That night, as I washed the dishes, I thought about the word family. How it was supposed to mean safety, comfort, belonging. For me, it meant invoices and excuses. Before going to bed, I scrolled through my messages. There were dozens from Mum and Dad, full of needs, complaints, guilt. But there wasn't a single message that said, "How are you?" I turned off the phone and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence in the apartment felt like the only thing that was truly mine. In the middle of the night, I woke again, not from a sound, but from the dream of falling. The same one as before, falling through space with voices calling my name, asking, demanding, pulling, and me still trying to reach them. When I opened my eyes, the room was dark, and the only sound was my own heartbeat. The next morning, the phone rang again. Dad's voice came first this time. "Morning, love, got a minute?" I rubbed my temples. "What is it, Dad? Don't sound so tired already," he said, chuckling. "Your mum wanted me to ask if you could send something extra this month. The boiler's acting up again. Didn't you say you fixed it last winter? Well, it broke again. Things wear out, you know, life's expensive." "So is mine," I said quietly. He didn't seem to hear. "You're doing well, though. I mean, you've always been the smart one." "We're lucky to have you." There it was again, affection with a hook inside it. "I'll send it later," I said. "That's my girl," he replied, and hung up before I could change my mind. I sat there in bed, staring at the gray light seeping through the curtains. The kettle clicked in the kitchen. The city was waking up again, and so was the weight. That day at work, I tried to focus, but my thoughts kept looping back to the same numbers. Debits, transfers, percentages of my life disappearing. Around 3 p.m., Richard called me into his office. Ivana closed the door for a moment. He looked kind but serious. "You're one of the best here, everyone knows that, but lately you've seemed distracted." "I'm fine," I said automatically. He smiled, not unkindly. "You always say that, but I mean it. Take care of yourself. Don't let anyone drain you dry." His words startled me more than I expected. For a moment, I wondered if he somehow knew. I wanted to ask what he meant, but instead I thanked him and left. That night, I transferred another £1,000. Then I poured myself another glass of wine. I sat by the window again, the city below glowing like a circuit board. Every light was a life in motion, someone's story unfolding. And mine felt paused, waiting for permission to exist. I thought about what Richard said. "Don't let anyone drain you dry." I whispered into the empty room, "It's already happened." And with that quiet confession, I closed my eyes and let the city hum without me. Sunday morning came with rain. Thin, persistent rain that streaked the glass of my window and turned the streets below into dark ribbons. I stood there for a while with a cup of coffee in my hands, watching the umbrellas move like slow insects across the pavement. My apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the window. I wanted to believe it was peace, but peace is something you earn. Silence is just what happens when people stop pretending to care. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't want to look, but curiosity had always been my weakness. The message was from Mum. "Are you free for a family call tonight? Just a small chat." A chat. That word always meant the same thing. I set the phone down and walked away. I tried to lose myself in small tasks, cleaning the kitchen, folding laundry, watering the plants, but the thought of that small chat kept circling back like a mosquito you can't swat. By evening, I gave in and joined the call. Mum's face filled the screen first, cheerful as ever. There she is, our star girl. Dad's voice followed from off-screen. Ask her if she got that bonus yet. Liam appeared behind them, eating cereal straight from the box. Hey sis, you look serious. Don't tell me work, making you old already? I forced a smile. Good to see you too. Mum laughed lightly. You know, your brother's just teasing. We're all proud of you, sweetheart. Dad leaned closer to the camera. But since you're doing so well, maybe you can help your brother get back on his feet. He's been trying to start something, a business idea, needs a small investment. Liam raised an eyebrow. Small, like a couple thousand. I took a deep breath. Liam, you've said that before. What kind of business is it this time? He shrugged. Freelance video production. Everyone's doing it now. I just need a better camera, a laptop upgrade, maybe a subscription to editing software. I smiled politely. And clients, he looked away. That's not the problem. Dad jumped in quickly. He's got potential. You know how the world works now. You've got to take risks. Risks are fine, I said quietly, but maybe it's time he takes them with his own money. Mum's face changed slightly just for a second. Ivana, don't talk like that. We've always supported each other. That's what family is for. Family? The word landed like a command. I looked at the three faces on my screen, familiar, beloved, and suddenly unbearable. My mouth went dry. I'll think about it, I said. Mum smiled again, relief flickering across her face. Thank you, love, you always come through. When the call ended, I sat staring at the dark screen. My reflection looked pale, distant. I whispered to it, do they even know who I am when I'm not useful? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing their voices overlapping, Dad's persuasive tone, Mum's guilt-laced softness, Liam's lazy arrogance. I wondered what would happen if I didn't answer next time. Would they panic? Would they find another solution? Or would they just find another person to lean on? The next morning, I overslept. I rushed to the office, still half inside my thoughts. The elevator mirror showed a woman who looked exhausted but determined to hide it. I straightened my blazer, pressed my lips together, and walked in. The day passed in a blur of meetings and numbers. Clients smiled, colleagues nodded, and I smiled back as if I belonged there, as if my personal life wasn't a storm I refused to step into. At 5, Ben stopped by my desk. You all right? He asked. I'm fine, I said automatically. He hesitated. You sure? You've been working through lunch all week. I just like to keep busy. Right, he said, but didn't believe me. Well, don't forget there's more to life than work. I smiled faintly. Is there? He laughed softly, but his eyes lingered with concern before he left. I finished the day late, long after most people had gone home. The office was quiet, just the hum of the vending machine and the flicker of fluorescent lights. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Somewhere deep down, I could feel the slow erosion of who I used to be, a person who believed love was something you could earn by giving enough. When I got home, the apartment felt colder than usual. I made tea, opened my laptop, and stared at my bank account again. The total had dropped again, another quiet bleed. I scrolled through the history and noticed something new, a transfer of £300 I didn't remember making. I opened the details and realized Mum still had access to the shared account I'd set up years ago for emergencies. My stomach twisted. I called her immediately. She answered on the second ring. Hi, love. Mum, did you take money from the account? Oh, that? Yes, but it was just for groceries and a little gift for your father. I meant to tell you. Mum, that account was supposed to be closed months ago. She laughed softly. You worry too much. I'll put it back, don't stress. You won't, I said before I could stop myself. There was a pause. Excuse me? You won't put it back, Mum, you never do. Silence stretched across the line, then her voice changed, small, wounded. I can't believe you talked to me like that, after everything we've done for you. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. I'm sorry, I just need to handle my finances better. Handle your finances? She repeated, the hurt sharpening into offense. Ivana, we are your family. You don't have to act like a stranger. I'm not acting like a stranger, I said quietly. I'm just trying not to drown, she sighed. You've been seeing that therapist again, haven't you? Filling your head with nonsense. I didn't answer. Her voice softened again. I raised you to have a kind heart, don't lose it now. When the call ended, I set the phone down and stared at it. Kind heart. That was her way of saying compliant. The next morning, I called the bank and permanently removed her access. The representative asked politely if I wanted to give a reason. I said, for my sanity. After work that day, I took a walk through the city. The air was crisp and clear, carrying the faint smell of roasted chestnuts from a vendor nearby. Christmas lights were everywhere now, glittering along the Thames like stars trapped in glass. People passed by carrying bags of gifts, laughing, holding hands. I felt invisible among them. I stopped at a cafe near Tower Bridge and ordered a hot chocolate instead of coffee. It tasted too sweet, but it reminded me that I could still choose small comforts. I sat by the window, watching the reflection of lights shimmer on the wet pavement. That was when another message arrived from Mum. "Darling, I didn't mean to upset you last night. Your father and I talked, and we realized we've been leaning on you too much. We'll try to be better." I smiled sadly. I'd heard that promise before. Always began with realization and ended with another request. Still, I typed back, "Thank you, Mum, I just need some space for now." Her reply came within a minute. "Of course, take all the space you need. By the way, do you know any good places for cheap flights? Your father found a good deal to visit you for Christmas, but we might need help booking." I laughed quietly, a sound closer to disbelief than humor. The other customers turned briefly toward me, then back to their own conversations. That night, I didn't send any money. I didn't even open the banking app. I left the phone on silent and let it die on the counter. I took a long shower, letting the water wash away the noise that lived under my skin. When I finally went to bed, I felt something shifting inside me, not a decision yet, but a question. How much of my life had I traded for peace that never lasted? The rain had stopped outside. I could see the moon between the buildings, pale and distant. I whispered into the dark, if love means losing myself, maybe it's not love at all. For the first time in years, I fell asleep with that thought instead of guilt. In the dream that followed, I was standing on a frozen river. The ice beneath my feet was thin and cracking, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked down and saw my reflection through the water, tired, but finally awake. And in that dream, I took my first step toward the shore. The first snow of December fell on a Thursday morning. It wasn't the soft, postcard kind of snow people dreamed about, but a thin gray dust that melted as soon as it touched the ground. From my apartment window, London looked washed out, like an old photograph fading around the edges. I sat at the small table with my laptop open, staring at numbers that refused to mean anything. The heater hummed, the air smelled faintly of coffee, and for a moment everything felt muted, not bad, just empty. Mum had been quiet for nearly a week. No calls, no texts, no hints about overdue bills or failing cars. At first, the silence felt like a miracle. Then it started to feel like a countdown. My chest tightened every time the phone buzzed, expecting the next wave to hit. By noon, the message finally came. "Mum, sweetheart, just a quick update. We might have to cancel Christmas this year. Money's tight and your father been under a lot of stress. It's breaking my heart, but we'll get through it. Don't worry about us." I read it twice. Cancel Christmas? The phrase didn't sound real. My family adored holidays, the decorations, the photos, the excuses to spend. For them to cancel anything meant something deeper was wrong, or it was another performance. I typed back carefully, "Are you sure you don't want me to come? I can bring food, gifts, whatever you need." Her reply came almost instantly. No, we can't host this year. The house looks terrible and your father's too embarrassed. Please, darling, don't make him feel worse." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I set the phone aside and sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet tick of the wall clock. I knew what she was doing. She was protecting the lie, the illusion that they were struggling so I'd keep sending money without resentment. That night, I walked through the Christmas market at South Bank. The air smelled of cinnamon and mulled wine. Strings of lights swayed above the crowd. Children ran past with glowing toys, their laughter bright against the cold. I bought a small ornament, a glass dove, and held it in my gloved hand. "Peace," it said in white letters across the wing. I wanted to believe it. The next few days passed quietly. I threw myself into work again, staying late, sending reports, answering emails long after midnight. The silence from home stretched on. For once, it didn't hurt. It just felt strange, like walking through a room after a loud party and realizing everyone's gone. On the 23rd, I decided I would go anyway. Not for a grand reunion, not even to fix anything, just to bring gifts to show that I still cared. Maybe that was weakness, maybe habit, but it felt right. That evening, I packed a small suitcase. A scarf for Mum, chestnut-colored wool with soft edges. A watch repair kit for Dad, because he used to love fixing things before he started gambling. A bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. For Liam, a wallet, simple black leather, nothing expensive. I wrapped everything neatly and added a handwritten card. "This isn't charity, it's love, Merry Christmas." The next morning, I left early. The roads were wet but clear, the gray sky hanging low like smoke. I drove the 2 hours to Birmingham with the radio low, Christmas songs humming in the background. The closer I got, the more I felt my chest tighten. When I turned onto their street, something inside me went still. Every house was decorated, lights twinkling on fences, wreaths hanging on doors, trees glowing through living room windows, every house except theirs. The curtains were drawn, the porch empty. I parked by the curb and sat for a moment, staring at the familiar brick facade. I got out, the cold biting through my coat, and carried the basket of gifts to the door. My fingers trembled slightly as I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. The street was silent except for the distant sound of a dog barking. I took a step back and looked around. The lights inside the house were off. Maybe they had gone out, I thought. Maybe Mum was serious about skipping Christmas this year. I placed the basket carefully on the porch, adjusting the ribbon so it wouldn't blow away. Then I texted her. "I'm here, Mum. I'll just leave these at the door. No need to open if you're busy." Her reply came quickly. "Oh, darling, we're not home. Your father's at the pharmacy and Liam has a late shift. You can just leave them outside. We'll pick them up later." Something about the message felt rehearsed, too smooth. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the drawn curtains. A faint glow of light leaked through one of them, the kind of glow a television makes. I turned back to my car, my boots crunching softly on the frozen pavement. I told myself not to think too much. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe they really weren't home. I started the car and drove down the street. At the corner, I stopped at the traffic light and pulled out my phone. A notification flashed across the screen, "Liam is live." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I tapped it. The video loaded slowly. The first thing I saw was color, bright gold and red. The camera spun around, showing a room filled with people, music, laughter. And then I saw it. My parents' living room, but not the dark, quiet version I'd just left. This one was glowing. A huge Christmas tree reached the ceiling, covered in ribbons and glass ornaments. The old sofa had been replaced by a sleek leather set. The dining table was covered with food, roasted turkey, platters of cheese, bottles of imported wine. Liam's voice filled the audio, cheerful and slightly drunk. "Merry Christmas, everyone. Look at this setup. We went all out this year." He laughed, turning the camera toward Mum. She wore a red dress, hair curled, lipstick bright. She waved at the phone. "Thank you all for coming. Family's what matters most." Then Dad appeared, holding a glass of whiskey, arm around someone I didn't recognize. "To family," he said, grinning. "The real kind, the ones who show up." I froze. The words hit like a slap. Liam moved closer to the camera, laughing. "SHH, don't tell Ivana, okay? Let her think we're broke, makes things easier." Everyone around him laughed. Someone off-screen added, "As long as she keeps sending the money, let her believe it." The camera shook with laughter. The music swelled. I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold, my throat closing up. The video kept playing, but the sound turned distant, muffled as if I were underwater. I watched my family, my parents, my brother, surrounded by warmth and light and lies. I closed the video, but the images stayed. I drove aimlessly for a while, through streets lined with lights I couldn't see anymore. The snow had started again, soft flakes melting on the windshield. I parked near a small park and turned off the engine. The world outside was silent except for the whisper of falling snow. I sat there, staring at nothing. My breath fogged the glass. Somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered, "You already knew." I thought about all the times I'd sent money without asking questions. Every promise they'd made to pay me back. Every time they said, "Family helps family." I laughed. A small, broken sound that echoed in the empty car. Then I cried, not the loud, messy kind of crying, but a silent, shaking release. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to hold on to. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my face with my sleeve and looked out at the snow-covered park. A single streetlight glowed softly, scattering halos of light across the ground. For the first time, I saw my reflection faintly in the glass. My eyes were swollen, but there was something steady in them. I whispered to that reflection, "I'm done." I didn't mean just the money. I meant the pretending, the hoping, the endless cycle of guilt. I turned the car around and drove back to London. The highway stretched ahead like a silver ribbon under the snow. When I reached home, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the small Christmas tree in my living room. The lights blinked softly, reflecting in the wine's surface. I picked up the glass dove I'd bought at the market and turned it in my hand. "Peace," it said again. It felt like a joke, but also a promise, one I was finally ready to make to myself. That night, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being alone. I felt free. The morning after that drive back to London, I woke up to silence that felt too sharp, like the air itself was holding its breath. My eyes were swollen, my throat raw. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of memories, floating between disbelief and clarity. I sat up slowly, every muscle heavy, my mind echoing with that line from the livestream. Don't tell Ivana. Let her think we're broke. I moved through the apartment in a daze. The tree lights were still on, blinking their small rhythm of false cheer. The coffee I made tasted like nothing. I sat on the couch with my laptop open but didn't touch it. I kept thinking of all the times I had sacrificed weekends, vacations, sleep, all the times I had convinced myself they needed me. By mid-morning, the numbness turned into motion. I opened my laptop again, this time with purpose. The cursor blinked on the empty search bar. I typed Instagram and found the live stream recording. It was still there. I pressed play again, not because I needed proof, but because I wanted to look at the truth without flinching. There they were, my parents laughing, my brother drinking and playing the perfect host. The decorations, the food, the new furniture, all of it bought with my money. Every sound was a reminder that I had been financing their celebration of my absence. I took screenshots one by one, the dinner table, the sparkling lights, my mother's smile as she said, "Family is what matters most." Liam's wink at the camera, Dad's arm around his friend, toasting to the ones who show up. The irony was almost cinematic. Then came the line again, like a knife finding the same wound. "Don't tell Ivana. Let her think we're broke." I paused the video and stared at the frozen frame. My mother's face mid-laugh, the soft glow of the lights reflecting in her wine glass. It wasn't even guilt I saw there, just comfort. She was at ease in the lie. Something inside me settled, not in anger, but in certainty. I opened a new document on my laptop and began to type. Expenses sent to family, 2024. I scrolled through my bank history, marking every transaction, every transfer. Rent, medical bills, repairs, laptops, gifts. It took 2 hours to list them all, each one a quiet confession. The total at the bottom of the spreadsheet made me dizzy. Over £36,000 in 1 year. I stared at the number until the edges of my vision blurred. That was more than I'd spent on myself in 3 years combined. At noon, my phone buzzed, a message from Dad. "Ivana, hope you're having a good morning. Quick favor, could you send $3,800? Need to cover the landlord before noon." No greeting, no apology. Just the next request, right on schedule. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands didn't shake anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only calm. I typed slowly, "No, and delete my number." Then I pressed send. The message went through instantly. I watched the blue tick appear. Then I blocked the number. I did the same with Mum's contact, then Liam's, then the family group chat that had once been filled with cheerful emojis and guilt-laced jokes. One by one, I erased them from my phone until the screen looked clean again. The quiet that followed was enormous. I sat there for a while, just breathing. For years I had thought saying no would destroy me, that they'd hate me, that I'd lose them forever. But what I realized in that moment was that I'd never really had them to lose. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Hannah. She had helped me once before, years ago, when Liam got into trouble with a lease he couldn't pay. Her voice was steady, professional, familiar. "Hi Hannah, it's Ivana, man. Ivana, good to hear from you. How can I help? I need to protect my finances. My family's been accessing my accounts and taking money under false pretenses. I have evidence." There was a pause. "Do you need immediate action?" "Not yet. I just want to prepare everything in case it escalates." "Understood. Send me the documents. I'll start building a file." Before hanging up, she asked gently, "Do you want to change your beneficiaries?" "Yes," I said. "Remove all of them." The words left my mouth with strange ease. That evening, I sat by the window watching snow fall over the city. People hurried past with bags of gifts, their faces red from the cold, their laughter echoing through the street. I wondered how many of them would go home to warmth and how many to guilt. A soft buzz broke the silence, a notification from Venmo. A payment request from Liam, £1,100, note, "Do you feel noble now?" I stared at it for a moment, then reported it as harassment and deleted the app. At 8, an unknown number called. I let it ring. Then another. Finally, I turned off the phone completely. For the first time in years, no sound followed. No vibration, no notification, just stillness. Later, I opened my laptop again and began closing old accounts, shared credit cards, emergency transfers, any trace of financial tether. Each click felt like cutting another invisible thread. When I was done, I walked into the kitchen, opened the jar of cookies I'd baked for Christmas, and one by one, dropped them into the trash. The sound they made as they hit the bin was oddly satisfying, like punctuation at the end of a long, heavy sentence. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, hands resting on the counter, heart beating slow and steady. I whispered, "No one can hurt me with my own money anymore." The heater hummed softly behind me. Outside, the snow thickened, falling against the glass in quiet sheets. I pressed my hand to the window and felt the chill on the other side. I thought of Mum's last message, Dad's casual request, Liam's smug grin on the live stream. They no longer felt like memories of love. They were chapters in a story that had finally reached its end. That night, I lay on the couch instead of the bed. The Christmas tree glowed beside me, casting soft light across the room. The glass dove hung near the top, spinning slowly with the draft. I watched it turn and thought about how peace doesn't come from forgiveness alone, sometimes it comes from walking away. I drifted in and out of sleep, the city outside quiet except for the occasional car passing by. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang midnight, Christmas Day. I woke up to gray light filling the room. The snow outside was untouched, smooth and white like a blank page. For once, I didn't rush to check my phone. I didn't feel the pull of obligation or the weight of expectation. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and sat down by the window. The world looked new, even if I wasn't sure what to do with it yet. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Ivana." It felt strange at first, saying it to myself, but then it felt right. I raised the mug toward the window, as if toasting the quiet city. Outside, the snow kept falling soft, endless, cleansing, and for the first time in my life, I let it fall without worrying who would shovel the path. I didn't go outside for 2 days after Christmas. The snow turned to slush, the air thickened with city fog, and still I stayed indoors, moving through my apartment like a quiet ghost. There was no one left to call, no family waiting, no arguments humming at the edge of every conversation. The silence, once terrifying, had started to feel like air I could finally breathe. On the third morning, I opened my curtains. Pale sunlight spread across the floor, soft and tentative. I stood there for a long time, holding a mug of coffee in both hands, letting the light touch my face. It was strange how stillness could feel like an act of rebellion, how choosing to do nothing could mean choosing yourself. That was when I decided to book the therapy appointment I'd been avoiding for months. Dr. Howard's office sat at the corner of a quiet street near Regent's Park. The walls were lined with books, the kind that smelled faintly of paper and age. A small plant sat on the windowsill, its leaves a deep green against the winter gray. He greeted me with a gentle smile. "Ivana, it's good to see you again." I sat down across from him, my coat still on. "I almost didn't come." "I'm glad you did," he said simply. For a while, neither of us spoke. The ticking of the small clock on his desk filled the space. I didn't know where to start, so I told him about the live stream, the laughter, the tree, the lies said so easily. I spoke until my throat felt dry. He listened without interrupting, his expression calm, patient. When I finished, he asked quietly, "How did you feel in that moment?" Like I'd been living in a story someone else wrote for me. He nodded. "And now I think I've reached the last page." He leaned back slightly, his pen resting on his knee. "You know, sometimes the end of one story isn't closure. It's an invitation to write another." I smiled faintly. "I'm not sure I remember how." "That's all right. Most people don't at first. But it begins with a simple question. If this new story were yours alone, what would it be about?" I thought for a long time. "Peace," I said finally, "and choice, 2 things I've never had at the same time." He smiled as if that answer pleased him. "Then that's where we start." After the session, I walked through Regent's Park. The snow had melted into patches of frost. Children played near the frozen pond, throwing small chunks of ice at each other and laughing. The sound was bright and honest. I watched them until my eyes stung, then kept walking. By the time I got home, the light was fading. I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair back, studying the face that looked back at me. There were faint lines near my eyes, a softness at the edge of my mouth. I didn't look strong, but I didn't look broken either. I looked human. I whispered to my reflection, "You don't have to save anyone today." The next morning, I made a list, not of tasks, but of boundaries. 1. No more shared accounts. 2. No answering calls after 9 p.m. 3. No apologizing for saying number 4. No sending money unless it's my idea. 5. No pretending I'm fine when I'm not. I pinned the list to the fridge. It looked small there, surrounded by old photos I hadn't taken down yet. There was one of me and Mum, laughing at a cafe years ago. Another of Liam holding a sparkler, the night we celebrated my first job offer. I took them off the fridge one by one and placed them in a drawer. The apartment looked emptier after that, but lighter too. Later that day, I met Maria from work for coffee. She greeted me with her usual warmth, her scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. "You look different," she said as we sat by the window. "Different how?" "Less tense, like you stopped waiting for something." I smiled. Maybe I did. We talked for a while about ordinary things, projects, office gossip, her plans for the new year. When the conversation drifted to family, she hesitated. "Are you seeing yours soon?" I shook my head. "No, not this year, maybe not for a while." She nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. "Good for you." As we left the cafe, the winter sun slipped through the clouds. It touched the frost on the street, making it glisten like tiny mirrors. That evening, I took a walk by the river. The city moved around me, the sound of footsteps, the smell of roasted nuts, the hum of buses passing. For years, I'd seen London as a backdrop to my exhaustion, a place I moved through on autopilot. But that night, it felt alive again. The water shimmered under the bridge lights, and for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about who needed me. I was thinking about what I needed. When I came home, I wrote in my journal, December 30th. I told the truth today to myself, to the mirror, to no one else. I didn't flinch. It felt like breathing fresh air after years underground. I closed the notebook and smiled. The next morning, I received a letter in the post. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, my father's. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Ivana, your mother's upset. You shouldn't have cut us off during the holidays. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted to celebrate for once. Families make mistakes. Don't turn your back on us, we're all we've got." No signature, just the initial D. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. Just a quiet certainty that this letter wasn't a bridge, it was bait. That night, I lit a candle and burned the letter in a small bowl on my balcony. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared into ash. The wind caught the last ember and carried it away. I whispered to the smoke, "Goodbye." The next morning, I woke up feeling light, almost empty in a good way. I put on my coat and walked to the small park near my apartment. The air was crisp and the ground glittered with frost. A group of women practiced yoga on the grass, their breaths visible in the cold air. One of them smiled at me and waved me over. I hesitated, then joined them. The instructor's voice was calm. "Inhale strength. Exhale everything that doesn't belong to you." I followed her words. Inhale, exhale, again. The cold air filled my lungs, and for a brief moment I felt something shift, a release I couldn't explain. When the session ended, one of the women handed me a cup of tea from a thermos. "First time?" she asked. "First time in years," I said. She smiled. "Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be." I walked home with that sentence echoing in my mind, exactly where I'm supposed to be. It felt strange and beautiful, like the beginning of a song I hadn't heard before. That evening, I stood on my balcony again. The city was glowing beneath me, golden and alive. Somewhere, bells rang for the new year approaching. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Let this be the turning." For once, it didn't feel like a wish. It felt like a decision. The new year began quietly. I didn't make resolutions, I didn't toast champagne, I didn't count down the seconds with strangers. I sat by the window in my apartment, wrapped in a blanket, watching fireworks scatter across the skyline. For once, I didn't feel like I was missing out on something. I just felt still. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The city was muted, hungover from celebration. I brewed coffee, opened the curtains, and watched the first gray light rise over the rooftops. The air felt different, as if the world itself was resetting. I took out my notebook and wrote the words January 1st, a life without guilt. The ink bled slightly into the paper, small rivers of black branching from each letter. Later that week, I went back to see Dr. Howard. The waiting room was quiet, faintly scented with mint and wood polish. When I entered his office, he smiled, gesturing to the chair across from him. "You look calmer," he said. "I think I am," I replied. "Or maybe I'm just numb in a better way." He chuckled softly. "There's a difference between numbness and peace. You'll learn to tell them apart." I nodded. "It feels strange not to be needed." "Does it scare you?" "A little," I admitted. "It's like losing a language I used to speak every day." "What did that language sound like?" "Apologies," I said, "and excuses for other people's choices." He leaned forward slightly. "And now that you're silent, what are you hearing instead?" I thought about that. "My own thoughts," I said, "and they're not as cruel as I expected." Smiled. "That's progress." After the session, I walked through the park again. The trees were bare, their branches cutting thin lines against the gray sky. A few people jogged past, headphones in, faces set with determination. I walked slowly, letting the cold air bite at my cheeks. The world no longer felt like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could witness. That night, I sat by the window again. The city lights blinked far below, and somewhere a siren wailed, fading into the distance. I opened my journal and began writing a letter I would never send. "Dear Mum, I used to think love meant giving until it hurt. I used to think the only way to keep people close was to buy my place in their hearts. But now I see that love isn't supposed to cost you your peace. You taught me to be generous, but you never taught me to be safe. I'm learning that part on my own. I still love you, but from here, from far enough away that I can breathe. I closed the notebook and exhaled slowly. The following weeks passed in small, deliberate steps. I started cooking again, simple meals, things I hadn't made in years because I was always too tired or too distracted. Pasta with fresh basil, tomato soup. Sometimes I even ate dinner without checking my phone once. I started taking evening walks, exploring parts of the city I had ignored for years. The river looked different at night, softer, less like a boundary and more like a mirror. I began to recognize familiar faces on my route. The man who sold roasted chestnuts near the bridge, the woman who walked her golden retriever at exactly 7 each evening. It was during one of those walks that I noticed something that stayed with me. A couple stood by the river, arguing quietly. Their voices didn't carry far, but I could see the tension in their bodies. The way she crossed her arms, the way he reached for her hand, the way she pulled back slightly. And then, after a moment, she let him hold it. They stayed there, looking at the water together, not speaking. I realized that love wasn't always loud or easy. It wasn't perfect, but it also wasn't supposed to hurt every day. When I got home, I wrote another line in my notebook. Love should make you softer, not smaller. 2 weeks later, Maria invited me to join a group for women in finance, an informal network where professionals shared experiences about work, burnout, and balance. I hesitated at first, but she insisted. It's not just about numbers, she said. It's about people who have forgotten how to put themselves on their own spreadsheets. The meeting took place in a small co-working space downtown. About 10 women sat in a circle, sipping tea. They talked about late nights, impossible expectations, the invisible weight of proving themselves twice as much for half the praise. When it was my turn to speak, I almost stayed silent. But something inside me nudged forward. I think I forgot how to separate care from control, I said quietly. I kept giving until there was nothing left, and when I finally stopped, I didn't know who I was without the giving. A few heads nodded. One woman across from me smiled gently. You're not alone, she said. For the first time in a long while, I believed that. After the session, Maria hugged me and said, you should come again next week. I will, I said, and I meant it. That night, I walked home under a light drizzle. The streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement, and the city smelled faintly of rain and possibility. I thought about how healing doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in quietly in the way your shoulders loosen, in the way your breath deepens, in the way you start choosing what's good for you without asking for permission. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window again. The reflection that looked back at me wasn't a stranger anymore. It was someone rebuilding. I whispered to her, you're doing fine. The following week, I met Dr. Howard again. He smiled as soon as I walked in. You look lighter. I feel lighter, I said, like I've stopped dragging something invisible. He nodded. What changed? I think I forgave them, I said, not because they deserve it, but because I do. His smile deepened. That's the hardest part, you know. People think forgiveness is about others. It's really about freeing yourself from their gravity. Then I guess I'm finally floating, I said softly. He chuckled. Just don't drift too far. The world still needs you in it. As I left his office, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. I walked down the street, and the light caught the frost on the pavement, making it sparkle. I took it as a small sign, not of destiny, but of direction. That evening, I cleaned my apartment. I threw away the things that carried too much weight, the old Christmas decorations Mum had sent, the unused gifts from years past. When I reached the bottom of the box, I found a card I didn't remember keeping. It was from my first promotion. Mum's handwriting curved across the paper. So proud of you, sweetheart. Remember, everything you earn for all of us. I stared at the line for a long time. Then I tore the card neatly in half and dropped it into the bin. I didn't need to earn for anyone else anymore. When I went to bed that night, I left the curtains open. The moonlight poured across the room, silver and clean. I fell asleep with the faintest smile, knowing that the next chapter of my life wouldn't begin with a demand, but with a choice. And somewhere deep inside, a voice that used to be small whispered, "This is the turning." It started with a notification I almost ignored, a soft vibration on my desk while I was finishing an end-of-quarter report. I glanced at the screen, expecting another message from Maria or a reminder from the calendar. Instead, I saw a tag from an unfamiliar Facebook post. Mum has tagged you in a photo. My stomach tightened before I even clicked it. The photo was old, me standing beside my parents in front of our childhood home, all smiles. The caption read, "Some children forget who gave them everything." Some hearts turn cold when money takes over, but a parent's love never ends. The comments came fast, like a small storm gathering speed. Old neighbors, family friends, distant relatives I barely remembered, all chiming in with pity and outrage. Poor parents, they raised her so well. Kids these days don't know gratitude. Money changes people. I stared at the screen, my throat tightening, my pulse beating against my neck. I didn't move for a long time. Then I saw Mum's comment under her own post. We're not asking for much, just a visit, just a call. But maybe we expected too much from success. I closed the browser slowly, my hands cold. At first, I told myself to ignore it, let them play their part in the drama, let the neighbors comfort them. I didn't need to defend myself. But the silence didn't feel like peace this time. It felt like watching a fire start behind a closed door. By the next morning, the post had spread. A cousin shared it with the caption, "Some families just need love." Someone else had taken screenshots and posted them on a community page. My inbox filled with messages, some polite, some sharp. A few people from work had even seen it. "Is everything okay with your parents?" One colleague messaged. "You know people are talking about that post, right?" Another said. I wanted to disappear. That afternoon, I walked to the break room for coffee and heard my name. Two coworkers were talking in low voices. "She's the one they're talking about online," one whispered. "Her parents wrote this heartbreaking post. Imagine cutting off your own family like that." I left before they noticed me. Back at my desk, my manager Richard sent me a message. "Can we talk?" In his office, he closed the door gently. "Ivana, I don't want to pry, but something going around online. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," I said, trying to steady my voice. He nodded, uneasy. "I don't care what's true or not. But if it starts affecting your reputation with clients, we might need to do some damage control." Damage control? Two words that turned my family's betrayal into a public relations issue. When I got home that night, I scrolled through the post again. Over 300 comments now, dozens of shares, each one a small cut. I typed out a dozen replies and deleted them all. Nothing I said would change what they'd chosen to believe. At midnight, I received a text from Liam. "You brought this on yourself. Maybe next time you won't treat family like trash." I didn't reply. 2 days later, the email came. Subject line, "Temporary leave recommendation." The company had received concerns about personal instability. They suggested I take time off to focus on well-being. I stared at the words, feeling them land one by one. Concerns about personal instability. They didn't even need proof, just whispers. Just a few posts from people who claimed to love me. I walked to the mirror. My face looked calm, but my hands were trembling. I whispered, "They found a new way to own me." The next morning, I turned off every social app. No Facebook, no Instagram, no messages. I deleted the ones that wouldn't stop ringing, but silence didn't last long. By evening, Maria knocked on my door holding 2 cups of coffee. "I saw the posts," she said quietly. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though the tears behind my eyes said otherwise. "They're just trying to make me come back." She sat beside me on the couch, her voice soft. "You don't owe anyone your silence, Ivana. You get to tell your own story." I shook my head. "It'll only feed them. They want attention. They want to win sympathy." "Then don't feed them," she said. "Live better instead. That's the only thing they can't twist." Her words sat with me long after she left. That night, I opened my journal again. They've turned their love into a weapon. They've turned my boundaries into betrayal. But if this is war, I refuse to fight with the same tools. I closed the notebook and let the city's hum lull me to sleep. The next morning, I went for a walk along the Thames. The air was crisp, the sky pale blue, the water reflecting streaks of light. I watched a family walking ahead of me, parents holding hands, a child on a scooter. Their laughter floated through the air, easy and unbroken. I didn't envy them. I just hoped the child never learned what it meant to buy affection. When I got home, another email waited, this time from my HR department. "Ivana, we've received reports suggesting possible mental health concerns. Please confirm if you're under professional care." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then it hit me this was Liam's work. His message, the tone of it, his cruelty. He had written to my office pretending to be concerned. I sat down slowly, staring at the screen. The fury came like a slow wave, deep and steady. Not a burst of rage, something colder. They wanted me to break down. They wanted to prove I couldn't live without them. I opened a new document and began to write, but this time not in my journal. I wrote a statement, simple, professional, factual. I am aware of defamatory statements circulating online. These do not reflect reality. I have taken legal measures to protect my privacy and reputation. I appreciate the company's discretion during this personal matter. I printed it, signed it, and scanned a copy to HR. Then I opened a new message to my lawyer, Hannah. They've escalated. I'll need to proceed with action for harassment and defamation. Let's start Monday. When I hit send, I felt something shift inside, not triumph, not revenge, just steadiness. The following Sunday, I visited the park again. The frost had melted, the grass damp underfoot. I sat on a bench with my notebook open, watching people pass by. You can't heal and stay silent at the same time, I wrote. You have to choose your piece loudly enough that it drowns out the noise. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I played music, real music, not just background noise. The piano filled the apartment, the sound warm and alive. I didn't cry this time. I smiled. For every lie they told, I would build a truth louder than their voices. Not by arguing, by living. The week after my company put me on temporary leave, I learned how fast a person could become a story. It took less than 48 hours for whispers to turn into truth and pity to turn into judgment. I became the ungrateful daughter, the cold career woman, the one who abandoned her parents after they sacrificed everything. I had been erased and rewritten by the people who claimed to love me. I spent the first 2 days trying to keep busy, scrubbing the kitchen, sorting drawers, deleting old files from my computer. But no amount of order could silence the chaos outside my apartment walls. On Wednesday morning, a message arrived from an old friend, Tessa. I know it's not my place, but your brother reached out. He said you're having a breakdown. Are you okay? I stared at the words until my eyes burned. A breakdown. They weren't content with ruining my reputation at work, now they were rewriting my sanity. I typed back slowly. I'm fine, Tess. Please don't believe anything they say. Her reply came fast. I don't, but you should know they're telling everyone you cut them off for no reason. That you've been unstable for months. My hands shook, my breath came shallow. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was a campaign. That afternoon, I met Hannah, my lawyer, at a small cafe near her office. She looked composed as always, a calm I wanted to borrow. I've gathered enough evidence, she said, sliding a folder across the table. Screenshots, posts, and messages, all public defamation. We can file a cease and desist letter first. If they continue, we escalate to legal action. I nodded, staring at the folder. Do it, she hesitated. Ivana, this will get ugly. Are you ready for that? I met her eyes. It's already ugly, I just want it to stop. She nodded. Then it will. After the meeting, I walked through the city in a daze. The streets were busy, full of life, everyone moving with purpose. I felt like a ghost among them, a person half erased by the lies of people who should have protected me. When I reached home, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of missed calls blinked on the screen. Mum, Dad, Liam, unknown numbers, voicemails. I played the most recent one. Mum's voice came first, broken, trembling. Ivana, what are you doing? How could you threaten us with lawyers? We're your family. Families don't do this to each other. You're sick. Please get help. Then Dad's voice, harder. You think you can destroy us? You'll regret this. People are already talking. You'll lose everything. I pressed delete. Another voicemail from Liam followed. You know, I used to feel sorry for you. Now I just think you're pathetic. You've turned into everything you swore you'd never be. I deleted that one too. I sat on the couch with the phone in my hand, the silence around me heavy. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting my own post, not a defense, not an argument, just the truth. I wrote, there are stories being told about me. Some by people I love, some by people who no longer know me. I won't compete with their version of me. I just want to say this, love is not control. Giving is not debt. Silence is not guilt. I've chosen peace, and that choice doesn't make me cruel. It makes me free. I read it twice, took a deep breath, and pressed post. Within an hour, messages started coming in, some supportive, some skeptical. Proud of you for standing up. There are always two sides to every story. Stay strong. For once, I didn't care about the mix. The words were out there, my own, not theirs. That night, I turned off the lights and sat by the window again. The city outside glowed faintly through the fog. I could hear the low murmur of traffic, the rhythm of a city that never stopped moving forward. Then came the email. Subject line, Ray, temporary leave. It was from HR. They had reviewed my statement and the situation. They would reinstate me officially next week. The words blurred as I read them. Relief came slowly, like a thaw. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath for days. I stood and walked to the mirror. For the first time in weeks, I didn't look like someone surviving a storm. I looked like someone who'd stopped running. But the peace didn't last long. 2 nights later, a new email arrived, this one from an unknown address. No subject line, no greeting, just a message. You think you're free? Wait until they see the messages you sent us. You can't erase what's already been shared. Attached were screenshots. My old texts to Mum, ones where I'd apologized, sent money, promised to help them no matter what. Twisted out of context, they looked like proof that I'd been emotionally unstable, obsessed with control. For a few minutes, I just stared at them, my mind blank. Then I checked the metadata, the file names, the timestamps. They had been edited, cropped, manipulated. Liam again. It had to be. I forwarded everything to Hannah with one line: "They're fabricating evidence." She called within minutes. "Ivana, listen to me. This is good. It means they're desperate. People who lie this loudly are running out of truth. We'll handle it legally." Her calm steadied me. "Okay," I said quietly. "Do whatever you need." After the call, I stood by the window again, staring at the streetlights below. My reflection looked back at me, tired, pale, but unbroken. I whispered, "You're not the villain in their story anymore. You've written your own." The next morning, I woke early and went for a walk. The city felt crisp, the air full of frost and promise. At a cafe near the corner, I ordered a croissant and a black coffee. The barista smiled and said, "Rough morning?" I smiled back. "Better than last week." When I got home, I found another message waiting, but this one was different. From Mum, just one line. I didn't know it would go this far. No apology, no explanation, just that. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting something new. Not an email, not a statement, a letter to myself. "Dear Ivana, you did not ruin a family. You survived one. You did not lose love. You discovered what it was, and you are not broken. You are becoming." I printed it and pinned it above my desk. That afternoon, the cease and desist letter was delivered. Legally binding, professional, final. Hannah called to confirm. "It's done," she said. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders drop. The war was over, or at least the part of it I had to fight. That evening, I walked to the river. The sky was streaked with orange, the water dark and calm. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the cold air. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who sent money just to keep peace, who mistook guilt for love. I whispered a quiet goodbye to her. And in that silence, I heard it, not words, but a kind of quiet hum, the sound of my life rearranging itself. I smiled. The first message came on a gray morning that smelled of rain. It was early February, the kind of day when the city seemed to hold its breath before another storm. I had just come back from a yoga class, my body warm and loose, my mind clear for the first time in weeks. I set my phone on the counter while making tea, and that was when it buzzed, once, then twice. The sender's name froze me where I stood. Dad. The preview line on the screen read, "We're in trouble." I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the phone as steam rose from the kettle, the whistle sharp in the quiet apartment. My first thought wasn't worry or guilt, it was exhaustion. After everything, after the posts and the lies, they still found a way to reach me. When I finally tapped the message, it unfolded like a script I'd already memorized. "Ivana, your mother and I are about to lose the house. We've fallen behind on payments. The bank sent a final notice. We need £12,000 to stop repossession. Please, this is the last time. We'll make it right. I swear on my life." There was an attachment, a photo of the notice. A red stamp across the page read "Final warning." For a long time, I just stood there, holding the phone, letting the words blur into a dull hum in my head. I could almost hear his voice saying it, that practiced mix of pride and desperation. The tea boiled over, spilling onto the counter. I turned off the stove and sat down. £12,000. I could have transferred it in seconds. Once, I would have. But now, the number didn't just represent money. It represented years of being the family's safety net, the invisible wall between them and consequence. I scrolled down to see the rest of the message. There wasn't more. Just that one promise I'd heard too many times before. Then another message arrived from Mum. "Please, Ivana, your father's heart isn't strong enough for this stress. Don't punish us like this. We're still your parents." I read that line again, "Don't punish us," as if my silence was cruelty, as if my peace was a weapon. I locked the screen and set the phone aside. The apartment was quiet except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Outside, rain began to tap gently against the window, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. I walked to the living room and sat on the couch, pulling the blanket over my shoulders. I stared at the ceiling, the cracks in the paint, the small imperfections that always caught the morning light. What if they really lost the house? What if the bank took everything? What if I could stop it and did? But another voice, calmer and firmer, spoke underneath the noise. "You've stopped saving people who refuse to swim." I picked up my phone again, opened a new message, and typed slowly. "Dad, I can't give you money anymore, but I can give you something else. There's a financial counselor who works with families in debt. I can put you in touch. She's free. She can help you set up a plan." I hesitated, then added, "And if you're struggling emotionally, I can find a therapist. Not to fix things between us, but for you." I want you both to get real help this time. I reread the message 3 times. It was firm but not cruel, clear but not cold. I pressed send. A few minutes later, 3 dots appeared. He was typing, then nothing. The dots vanished. Hours passed, no reply. That night I dreamed of the old house. The walls were empty, boxes stacked everywhere. Mum stood by the window, staring out at the rain. Dad sat at the table, head in his hands. When I tried to speak, no sound came out. I woke up with tears on my face. The next morning, there was still no response. I went to work trying to lose myself in routine, but my mind kept drifting back to that unread silence. At lunchtime, I met Maria. She noticed my distraction immediately. "You heard from them again, didn't you?" I nodded. "They're losing the house." She sighed softly. "And you?" I told them I wouldn't send money. I offered help instead. "That's enough," she said. "You're giving them the only kind of help that actually matters." I looked at her uncertain. What if they really can't survive without it? She reached across the table, her voice gentle. "Ivana, they survived before you. They'll survive after you. You're not their oxygen, you're just the air they got used to breathing for free." Her words hit deep. I smiled weakly. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," she said, "but it's necessary." That evening, I came home to a voicemail. Dad's voice, quiet but sharp around the edges. "I saw your message. A counselor, a therapist? Are you serious? We're drowning, Ivana, and you're sending us pamphlets. Don't pretend this is compassion. You've become cruel. You're not the daughter I raised." The line clicked. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt grief, but it wasn't for them. It was for the version of me who would have believed him. I set the phone down and went to the balcony. The rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement below. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, then faded into silence. I whispered into the night, "I'm not the daughter you raised. I'm the woman you taught to survive you." The next morning, I checked my email. There was a reply from the financial counselor I'd mentioned. She'd already reached out to my parents. They hadn't responded. I wasn't surprised. Help only worked when people wanted it. Later that day, I met Dr. Howard again. I told him everything, the messages, the silence, the guilt that still clung to me like a shadow. He listened quietly, then said, "Do you know what you've done, Ivana?" "What?" "You've replaced reaction with response. You didn't abandon them. You stopped abandoning yourself." I sat back in my chair, letting that sink in. He continued, "When you refuse to play the role someone wrote for you, they'll call it betrayal. But it's really freedom." That night, I came home and poured a small glass of wine. I sat by the window, watching the city flicker alive in the distance. I thought about all the times I'd answered those desperate calls, all the mornings I'd sent money before brushing my teeth, all the nights I'd whispered apologies into the dark. I whispered something different this time. I did enough. The words felt like truth. Then, for the first time in years, I turned my phone off, not out of anger, not out of fear, but because I wanted to hear what peace actually sounded like. It sounded like nothing at all. 2 days passed without a single message. It was the longest silence between us in my entire life. At first, it felt unnatural, like walking into a room where a clock had stopped ticking. Then it started to feel like relief. I woke up, made breakfast, went to work, and came home without the weight of their words waiting in my inbox. My thoughts were my own again, uncolonized by guilt. On the third morning, my phone buzzed at 5:12 a.m. I reached for it, half asleep, expecting another early news notification. But when I saw the caller ID, I froze. "Mum," I stared at the screen until the ringing stopped. A minute later, a voicemail arrived. I played it with trembling hands. Her voice was shaky, softer than I remembered. "Ivana, your father, he's in the hospital. It's his heart. They said it was mild, but I don't know. Please come, please." I sat up, the sleep falling off me like dust. The sound of her crying on the recording made something twist inside my chest. My pulse quickened. I wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to believe this time it wasn't another performance. I dressed quickly, hands trembling, and booked a train to Birmingham. The ride was quiet, the scenery a blur of rain-streaked windows and gray fields. My mind replayed every word of that message, trying to detect the tone, the rhythm, the truth hidden between breaths. When I arrived at the hospital, the smell of antiseptic filled the air. A nurse at the front desk directed me to Ward C. I walked down the hallway, my shoes echoing softly against the tile. Through the half-open door, I saw him, Dad, lying in bed, tubes attached, eyes closed. Mum sat beside him, her hands clasped, head bowed. For a moment, I couldn't move. The sight of them so small, so fragile, collapsed something inside me. I stepped in quietly. Mum looked up. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "Ivana," she whispered, standing. I didn't speak, I just nodded. My gaze fell back on him. His chest rose and fell slowly, the steady rhythm of a heart fighting to keep pace. "He collapsed last night," Mum said. "They said it was stress, too much pressure." I wanted to ask from what: gambling, lying, losing control, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the man who had been both my anchor and my storm. After a while, he opened his eyes. They were dimmer than I remembered, but still sharp. "You came," he said, his voice rough. I nodded. "You're lucky to be alive." He gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "Luck's all I've ever had." Mum reached for my hand. I hesitated, then let her hold it. Her skin felt thinner, her grip weaker than I remembered. For a second, I saw the mother who used to braid my hair before school, who stayed up with me when I had fevers. And then, like mist clearing, I remembered the years of manipulation, the debt, the guilt she wrapped like ribbons around love. "Dad," I said softly, "you need to stop this. The lies, the pretending, it's killing you." He looked at me with eyes that had once terrified me. This time they looked tired. "I just wanted to keep things together," he said. "For her, for Liam." "You don't keep a family by breaking someone else," I said quietly. He didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward the window. Rain tapped against the glass. A doctor came in and adjusted his IV. "He's stable," she said. "He needs rest and less stress." I thanked her and stepped outside to the hallway. Mum followed. "I didn't know who else to call," she said, voice trembling. I folded my arms. "You could have called an ambulance, a counselor, the bank, but you called me." Her lip quivered. "Because you're our daughter." "Then why did you turn the world against me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "We were scared. You left us. We didn't know what else to do. We thought if people saw how much we were hurting, you'd come back." I took a slow breath. "You didn't need to make me the villain to ask for help." She wiped her eyes. "We made mistakes." "No," I said. "You made choices. There's a difference." She looked down, silent. We stood there in the sterile light for what felt like hours. Somewhere down the corridor, a machine beeped steadily. "Finally," I said, "I'll pay for his hospital bill. That's all I can do. After that, you'll need to handle the rest. I can't keep being the rescue." She nodded slowly, as if realizing there would be no argument this time. When I returned to the room, Dad was asleep. I stood at the foot of the bed and looked at him for a long moment. For years, I'd thought he was unbreakable, the loudest voice in the house, the one who made the rules. But seeing him there, small and pale under the hospital lights, I realized he was just another human being who never learned how to face the silence. I whispered, "I forgive you." Not because he asked for it, but because I needed to say it out loud. That night, I stayed in a small hotel across the street. I couldn't bear to go back to the old house. I watched the hospital lights from my window, each one glowing like a distant signal I couldn't quite decode. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Mum. "He's sleeping. Thank you for coming." I typed back, "I hope he recovers. Take care of yourself." Then I turned off the light. The next morning, I checked out, left a note for the nurse with payment details, and walked to the station. As the train pulled away, I looked out the window. The city faded behind me, the horizon opening wide and clean. For the first time, I didn't feel pulled backward. I felt untethered in the best possible way. When I returned to London, I went straight to the park. The air smelled of wet earth and early spring. Children were feeding pigeons near the fountain, their laughter echoing against the stone. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face. It wasn't peace that filled me exactly. It was something quieter, a kind of release, the space that appears when you stop fighting ghosts. Later that week, Dr. Howard asked me, "What do you think forgiveness means now?" I smiled faintly. "It means letting the past stop borrowing space in my future." He nodded. "And love?" "Love," I said, "means giving without disappearing." That evening, I came home and opened my journal. February 17th. I saw my father today. He's smaller than the man I remember. So am I. Maybe that's what healing looks like, shrinking the parts that hurt until they no longer run your life. I set down the pen and looked out the window. The sky had turned gold at the edges. A flock of birds crossed the horizon, moving together, free but still connected. I whispered to myself, "I can love them from here." It was the truest sentence I had ever spoken. Spring arrived slowly, like someone tiptoeing into a room afraid to wake it. The city changed color, pale skies softened into blue, buds formed on trees that had looked dead for months, and people began walking with their jackets unbuttoned again. I started walking too. Every morning before work, I took the long route through the park, past the pond where ducks swam in quiet circles. Each day, I stopped at the same bench, the one with peeling paint and initials carved into the wood. It became a ritual, my own small claim to stillness. I wasn't sure when my life had started feeling normal again. There was no single moment, no cinematic turning point. It was just small things. waking up without dread, cooking breakfast without rushing, catching myself humming in the shower. Sometimes healing isn't a grand revelation. It's the slow return of things you forgot you loved. At work, people had stopped whispering. The rumors faded like old graffiti washed away by rain. My projects picked up again, and for the first time in years, I was promoted quietly without speeches or spotlights. Richard called me into his office one afternoon and said, "You earned this, Ivana. Don't question it, just take it." When I walked home that evening, the city lights looked different. Not brighter, just kinder. I bought a small bouquet of tulips from a street vendor and placed them on my kitchen table. Their colors, pink, white, yellow, were imperfect and real. They reminded me that life didn't need symmetry to be beautiful. That weekend, I visited Maria's apartment for dinner. She lived on the top floor of a narrow building with creaky wooden stairs and an endless view of the skyline. She greeted me at the door with a hug and a glass of wine. "I made pasta," she said, grinning. "But don't expect miracles." "It smells like one," I said. We ate, we laughed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest. Her friends arrived later, a mix of designers, writers, teachers, people who talked with warmth instead of judgment. Someone put on music, and we all danced in the small living room. I hadn't danced since university. It felt awkward at first, then easy, then joyful. At one point, Maria raised her glass. "To found families," she said, "the ones we choose when the ones we're born with forget who we are." Everyone clinked glasses. The moment hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't sadness. It was recognition that love didn't vanish when the source changed. It just moved like water finding a new riverbed. Later that night, I walked home under a sky full of stars. The air was cool and alive. I realized I hadn't thought about my parents all evening. Not once. That realization felt strange and freeing at the same time. When I reached my apartment, I saw the small paper tulips glowing faintly in the lamplight. I sat at the table, poured a bit more wine, and opened my journal. March 8th. I danced tonight. I didn't check my phone once. No one needed saving, not even me. I closed the notebook and smiled. The next morning, an email waited for me. It was from Liam. "Hey, Dad's doing better. Mum says thanks for helping with the hospital bills. I know you probably don't want to talk, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I read it twice, unsure how to feel. The words didn't erase anything, but they felt like a door left slightly ajar. For the first time, there was no manipulation in his tone, just exhaustion, maybe even regret. I typed slowly, "Thanks for the message. I'm glad Dad's better. I hope you both find the help you need." Then I added one last line, "Take care of each other. I'm doing fine." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was closure in its simplest form. Weeks passed. I started volunteering on weekends at a small community center near Shoreditch, a financial literacy program for young women. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd once let love drain her bank account was now teaching others how to protect theirs. But maybe that was the point, to turn the wounds into something that helped someone else heal faster. One Saturday after class, one of the girls approached me. She couldn't have been more than 19. "Miss Mann," she said shyly, "you said something last week that stuck with me." "What was that?" I asked. "That boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you keep the key to," I smiled. "And I think I finally locked the right one." Her words warmed something deep in me. "Good," I said. "Now make sure you know when to open it again, too." As she left, I stood by the window watching the sunlight dance on the glass. That sentence, "boundaries aren't walls," echoed in my mind. Maybe I had written it for myself as much as for her. That night, I called Dr. Howard to tell him I was ready to end therapy. He sounded pleased. "You've come a long way," he said. "I feel like myself again," I replied. He paused. "No, Ivana, you're better than that. You've met the version of you that was waiting underneath all the noise." After the call, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked the same eyes, same hair, same faint scar above my eyebrow, but the expression was different. Softer. "Cert," I whispered, "I'm still here." A week later, Maria and I took a weekend trip to Brighton. The sea air was cold and salty, the wind sharp enough to sting. We walked barefoot along the shoreline, our shoes dangling from our hands. Waves crashed, foam curling around our ankles. I felt alive in a way I hadn't since childhood. At one point, Maria stopped and looked out at the horizon. "What do you think forgiveness really is?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "It's when you stop waiting for someone to fix the past before you start living your future," she smiled. "Then you've already done it." We stood there in silence, the wind whipping through our hair. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, the same water that had touched every shore in the world. It reminded me that distance didn't mean separation. Sometimes it was the only way to keep floating. When I came home that evening, the apartment smelled like tulips and fresh air. I lit a candle, opened my journal, and wrote, April 2nd. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering differently. It's learning to tell your story without shaking. It's realizing you don't need a witness to validate your survival. I put down the pen and smiled at the flicker of the candle. I didn't need an audience anymore. I didn't need to prove I was good or kind or strong. I just needed to live in a way that felt true. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The next few months unfolded like a film shot in soft focus. The hard edges of everything began to blur, the memories, the pain, even the silence. Life didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a garden I could finally walk through barefoot. By late spring, I had developed a rhythm that felt like my own heartbeat. Mornings with sunlight spilling across my bed, quiet breakfasts by the window, work that no longer drained me but grounded me. In the evenings, I read again novels, poetry, even the old sketchbooks I used to keep in university. My apartment had grown warm, lived in, full of plants and laughter from the occasional dinner with friends. I didn't realize it at first, but I had stopped waiting for anything to happen. For years, I had been living like a person bracing for the next storm, always ready to fix, to defend, to apologize. Now, each day felt like a soft promise, nothing to fix today, just live. One Sunday, Maria and I took a train to the countryside for a small retreat organized by her friend. It was held in an old stone house surrounded by rolling hills and wildflowers. The theme was simple: building new definitions of home. The facilitator, a gentle woman with silver hair, asked us all to close our eyes and picture the place we felt most at peace. For the first few seconds, my mind went blank. I expected to see my childhood house, but it didn't come. Instead, I saw my own apartment, the yellow light on my bookshelf, the tulips on the table, the sound of the kettle boiling. And in that moment, I realized something so simple it almost made me laugh. I had built my home inside myself. When I opened my eyes, the room was quiet. The facilitator smiled at me knowingly, as if she could see what I had just discovered. Later, as we walked through the field, Maria asked, "What did you see?" "My apartment," I said softly, "and me inside it reading and drinking coffee." She grinned. "You've made peace your address." That night, back in London, I stood on my balcony watching the lights blink across the river. I thought about that sentence, peace as an address. It felt right. Because peace wasn't a moment you found. It was a home you kept tending to, no matter how many times the world tried to burn it down. In May, I received another email from Liam. Just 2 lines: "Dad's recovering well. Mum's started counseling. I wanted you to know, I'm trying too. No guilt, no excuses, just quiet honesty." I didn't reply immediately. I let it sit for a few days, not out of spite, but because I wanted to answer from calm, not caution. When I finally wrote back, it was simple. "I'm glad to hear that. I wish you both peace." That was all. I didn't know more, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to give more. The conversation didn't continue, and that, too, was its own kind of closure. One evening, after finishing a long day at work, I stopped by the community center where I volunteered. The financial literacy group had finished early, and a few of the girls stayed behind to chat. We talked about budgeting, relationships, and the strange freedom that comes with saying no. One of them, a quiet girl named Noor, asked, "How did you know you were finally free from your family's control?" I thought for a moment before answering, when their silence stopped feeling like punishment. She nodded slowly, as if tucking that sentence into her pocket for later. After everyone left, I sat alone in the empty classroom, sunlight fading through the windows. The chalkboard still held the day's topic in big white letters: ownership. It struck me then how fitting that word was, not just in money, but in life. Owning your choices, your peace, your story. When I left the building, the sky was streaked with orange and lilac. The air smelled faintly of rain. I walked without destination, just following the rhythm of my footsteps on the pavement. And somewhere along that walk, I realized something important. I no longer defined myself by what I had survived. I was finally living in what I had become. That night, I lit a candle and opened my journal one last time. June 1st. There was a time when love felt like a weight. Now it feels like light. I still think about them sometimes, but the memories don't ache anymore. They just exist, quiet, harmless, like old photographs in a drawer. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a bridge back to someone. It's the act of walking away without bitterness. I paused, then added, and family. Family is whoever sits with you in the silence and makes it feel like music. I closed the notebook and smiled. I didn't need to write another entry. The story had found its ending. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight cutting across the floor, scattering in golden shards. I made coffee, opened the window, and let the air in. Somewhere below, a street musician was playing a soft tune on a violin, something wistful but full of hope. I stood there for a long time, listening, the warmth of the cup in my hands grounding me in the present. I wasn't waiting for the past anymore. I wasn't afraid of the quiet. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was enough. Months later, on a bright summer afternoon, I walked through the park and passed my old bench. Someone had repainted it, a soft teal now, with new initials carved into the wood. I ran my fingers across the surface, smiling. I sat down and looked at the sky, watching the clouds drift lazily by. Children laughed in the distance. The world kept spinning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt perfectly aligned with it. I whispered into the breeze, not as a plea, but as gratitude. Thank you for the silence that taught me how to listen. The wind brushed my face gently, carrying the scent of grass and sunlight, and I smiled, knowing the story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about return, not to them, but to myself.